Welcome to the Sowing Hope podcast. This is a show all about implanting hope in our hearts. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend DeSantis. We're glad you're here for our uplifting conversation about faith and how it sustains our hearts through all the seasons of life. Thanks for walking with us. And good morning, everybody, and welcome to Sowing Hope. I'm Bill Snyder, joined by my friend DeSantis. We're so glad you are here this morning on Podbean and on YouTube. We could not be happier that you have joined us for our 7th episode of Sowing Hope. Good morning, Ann, and welcome into the program, and thank you so much for being with me again this morning here.
Good morning. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, it's great to have you, and it's great to... a little bit of technical problems this morning, so if Ann sounds a little different to you all, it's because just having a little bit of some technical issues with the phone this morning and Skype, but nevertheless, she is with us, and we're glad that she is here. So, Ann, today we are going to be talking about the poor, right, and helping the poor. It's a really good topic.
Yes, that is the topic that we selected, and I do think it's a good one, not just for the season of Lent that we're in right now, but it's just a good topic all the way around because the poor are everywhere, and it's the Lord's command that we reach out to them. For whoever's listening, I don't know. I mean, all of us have some kind of lack of something in our lives that makes us somewhat poor, whether it even be something spiritual or materially. But all of us have a little bit of that in our lives, whoever we are, whether you're somebody who has a health condition or a lack of friends, lack of food, lack of water, lack of a place to live, trying to find a job. There's all kinds of ways that people are poor. And I know that Bill, I know you've experienced that yourself, and I have too. But it's our ability to go beyond ourselves to reach out to others where we make a difference for God and for the world.
It really is. We do have to reach out to other people, and we have to reach into the homes and hearts of people who are suffering. You know, one of the greatest joys in my life, and I love telling this story. We've got a few stories for you today, and I think stories are always good reminders of how God works in our past and can work in our present. One of the stories that I have for you is today. I'd like to tell an amazing story about my parish back in St. Patrick's in Malvern, believe it or not, all the way out in Ann's neck of the woods, and my mom and dad were somebody. They were part of a program. Our entire family was part of a program called the Christmas Angels, and I don't know if you know what that is, but basically the people, about 12 people, the 12 nights before Christmas Day, so from the 12 days before Christmas, not the 12 days after Christmas, which are traditionally the 12 days of Christmas, the families would get together, and they would put together baskets and things that the needy families in the parish needed. We would identify 12 needy families, and these 12 other families, which were, we were part of the giving, we were part of the Christmas Angels. What we would do is we would travel and play Ding Dong Ditch, and we would leave these baskets of cheer. One year might be, cocoa and, movies or DVDs or whatever. We would leave them on the doorstep, and, my brother and I would run up to the front door. We'd ring the doorbell, and we'd leave it on their step, and we'd run back. We were completely anonymous. And we knew, it was amazing because, each one of these families that was selected to receive these baskets had particular needs. Maybe just a loved one had just died really suddenly. Maybe there was a loss of a job. Maybe there was something that made them in need. And it wasn't always the most needy families, but it was the one that had the most immediate need in our community. And I always thought, we did it right. They would reach out to the police department so that, if they started getting weird phone calls, somebody's leaving, baskets on my doorstep, the police would know about it. But it was always a beautiful, beautiful thing. And helping the poor in that way was just it was part of me growing up. I mean, I think we did it for 7, 8, 9 years. In fact, my parents had moved to Chicago, and one year when they had moved to Chicago, my brother and I did it by ourselves. We were both in college. I was almost out of college, and he was in college, and the two of us did it just ourselves. It was that much. It was that meaningful. We were, we stayed in Philadelphia because we were both close to Philadelphia right before we flew home for Christmas. One of the nights, 12 nights before Christmas. I think the last time we did it was maybe in 2006 or 2007. But it was just an amazing experience each and every year that we did it. So, I just am, so blessed by that particularly, and so blessed by that particularly in my life and giving to the poor, and it was an amazing experience that gave back to me. I think that's another big piece of this entire thing is that when you help the poor, you receive so much in return, especially during this Lenten season when we're called to give alms. And this is not me bragging because I was so blessed for those years to be able to encounter that. It was just incredible. The goodwill and the notes that were left on the front door, by these people that said thank you so much, whoever you are. There'd be signs and posters and things, and we only did it one of the 12 nights, but it was amazing. Every year to do it. It was such a beautiful way to give back.
What a great memory for you, Bill, and not just a great memory, a great experience, not just for your family, but for mostly for the people that were on the receiving end. My goodness. I commend your family that you were involved in something like that because it's something that you're telling the story this morning years later, right? I mean, so it had an impact on your own life to be able to share that with others. I was taking a look at a quote from Mother Teresa, and I know Bill, you and I had talked about that Saint Saint Teresa of Calcutta is our patron, one of our patrons for this program. She says, being unwanted, unloved, uncared for, forgotten by everybody, I think that is a much greater hunger, a much greater poverty than the person who has nothing to eat. Not to say that we shouldn't take care, because we know that's in Scripture, right? I mean, feeding the hungry, giving drink to the thirsty, shelter. But remember, the poor are all around us. They might even be in your own home, right? I mean, it could be somebody within your own family or your neighborhood, or your enemy, which is probably the hardest one to reach out to. But we still have that command of loving our enemies and making outreach to them too.
Yes, absolutely. One of the biggest things we have to do is reach out to our to those people who are suffering spiritually, as well as the quote from Mother Teresa says. Those people who are suffering spiritually, that have no friends and nobody to care for them. I actually use that quote in my Advent devotional for one of the days. Believe it or not, from Mother Teresa. And when we're always talking about the spiritual works of mercy and the corporal works of mercy. Both of those works of mercy are very, very important to reach out to the poor, to reach out to the both the spiritual and corporal. So yes, I mean, how can you support those who are? It's a really good question. How can you support those who are suffering from loneliness or spiritually poor, like they're unwanted, or they, how can you support them? And how can, even more importantly, how can you identify them? Because when somebody is out there, right, who is, on the street and, holding a sign that says, please help me, I'm a disabled veteran, or whatever, homeless, it's pretty easy to identify that's a need, right? But when somebody is completely, fine materially, but they don't have anybody that has that connection, that loves them deeply, how do you identify that? And I think that we as Christians need to, we as Catholics need to identify that.
That's right. And use the word identify. I read one time that is one of the key ways that we can get to know Christ in our lives, is when we identify with the poor. But as you said, the definition of the poor, it's different. I mean, another thing that Mother Teresa said was that our Calcutta can be right in our own backyard. Her Calcutta, of course, was in Calcutta, right? I mean, all the people there that she served and ministered to. But we have people here in our own communities and our own families that we can make outreach to. Sometimes it's just spending time with people. I think that's what people like the most. My daughter said to me, actually the other day, she said, Mom, now she's 21. She said, I want to thank you that we have dinner together during the week, because a lot of my friends, it's not something that they do. They don't really spend time together. So, she's 21 and in college, lives at home and commutes to school. But apparently that's not something that everybody does on a nightly basis, or maybe even on a weekly basis.
Yeah, that's something that definitely was a was a was a staple in my home, right? It was a staple in my home, absolutely. Yeah, that we had weekly, or even, pretty much daily dinners together at the table growing up. Pretty much daily, we were at the table, sitting down for dinner every night. At least through, I would say, most of high school. Most of high school. Once high school hits and you're busy and you're in the plays and you're stuff, but through middle school, and most of high school, we, when everybody was home, we sat down and we ate dinner every night together as a family. And I think that enriched our spirituality together. There were times I think we all bristled with it. I didn't always like it, but for the most part, I think it developed our family chemistry. We all stuck together. We all were close with one another because we sat down and ate together. And even if you're angry with another person in your family, your immediate family, you learn how to get it out over dinner and stuff like that.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I think in today's world too, with the busyness and everything, and technology obviously is a little bit of a distraction for many of us, right? When you sit down to eat dinner, you can put the phone down for a few minutes, and hopefully more than a few minutes, but spend time together, because that's where it all happens. Another thing, I just pulled this up. This is from the Holy Father. He says, the fight against poverty and hunger must be fought constantly and on many fronts, especially in its causes. And that goes to what we were talking about too, because we're talking about how it's everywhere, but he's saying that poverty and hunger, that's an important thing that we should all think about. I want to make a shout out, if I could, to an organization that helps to fight hunger. It's called Fiorenza's Food for Friends. You can learn about them online at f4service.org. My husband just so happens to be on the board, but what they do is they take the food from neighborhoods or from communities, from restaurants or ballpark stadiums, some food that might just be wasted, or that it's in somebody's cupboard that they're not really thinking too much about, canned food or something, and collecting that food and getting it to the people that need it. So anybody listening, check it out. Fiorenza's Food for Friends. And I want to thank Derek Fiorenza and Brenda Russell, the executive director, because they're doing great work in the greater Philadelphia area. But Bill, they're also in 42 states. So they're all over the country and they're expanding. So, I mean, that's a way to help those in need. Because there's a lot of young school children, honestly, that are even living in families that go to school and the only time they get to eat is maybe when they're at school. And, they're not eating breakfast, they're not eating dinner because the family, for whatever reason, sometimes families can't afford to feed the kids and provide food. So,
Yeah, I mean that's a big thing. I mean, I think childhood hunger and childhood poverty is such a difficult you know problem in society, and overcoming stuff like that, because there's plenty of food in the whole world. I mean, there really is. There's plenty of food in the whole world to feed it over and over and over and over and over again, folks. you know. So, how do we as Christians and Catholics take an active role in doing that? Well, it is supporting organizations that do have the capacity and the ability and the mission to support others, and that's giving. I mean, there's great organizations like the one Ann mentioned that can do that. So when you support those organizations that help the poor, you're helping to feed people. But I encourage you. I mean, I'm always one of those people where I enjoy connecting with other human beings as well. So invite somebody over for dinner. I mean, if you see that, maybe you're a teacher at a school, a small, parochial Catholic school or whatever, in somewhere, right? And you see that a child isn't bringing their lunch every day, or something, and they're missing a lunch on a regular basis. It might be reaching out to the family and just saying, hey, you know what? Why don't you guys come over for dinner? Why don't you come over, and spend time with them and get to know them and connect with them. And, in that regard, you might learn more about their story, and you might be able to help them in a different way. I mean, there might be all kinds of graces that are poured out to you just by, entering into a relationship, or pouncing on the need of somebody. I remember I was at a Catholic conference, at a Steubenville conference, several years ago with a bunch of teenagers, and one of the speakers, Sarah Swafford, said, it was in a different context, but she said, anticipate the need of people. And it's just really good advice. Why is holding the door open for somebody important? Because you're anticipating their needs. They need to go in too. They need to enter into a building too. They need food too. Anticipate the need. If you can anticipate their needs and help before they ask for it, that's when a lot of these problems end up being solved. That's when they end up being solved. And so.
No, I agree with you completely, Bill. I mean, it's an effort for all of us. We are part of community. I mean, and you and I are Catholic, and some of our listeners here are Catholic, but you know what? The whole world, we're all part of community. And that's what the word Catholic means, universal. So we're thinking not just about people exactly like us, but everybody. Making that outreach to everyone who's in need. Another thing I just found that the Holy Father said was, he says, we must restore hope to young people, help the old, be open to the future, spread love. Be poor among the poor. We need to include the excluded and preach peace. I mean, I think it can't be said any better than that. to include the excluded, because how bad is it, if anybody's listening out there, how bad is it to feel not part of either a family, a group, a neighborhood, wherever you go, when you're there and you don't feel part of it. I don't think there's anything in the world that feels worse than that, is not feeling excluded. So that's what really I think, Bill. I think that's a big part of helping the poor, is opening up your arms, not just to write a check, not just to hand over a bag of food, but hand over your heart, right? I mean, don't you think?
Yes.
Hand over your heart to somebody who feels misunderstood or isn't part of the group, and taking the time to look at somebody in the eyes and actually speak to them, instead of, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's not good to, write a nice sized check and also give somebody a big bag of groceries or whatever. But when you make it part of your own mission to befriend them, right? Because doesn't it say in Scripture that, don't just invite people that you're friends with to dinner or when you're having some kind of a feast. Go out in the streets and invite the crippled, the lame, people who are not, right, exactly. So, I mean, isn't that what we're called to do? I tend to be attracted to people, myself, friends that aren't exactly, the straight A perfect students, or the people that everybody tends to just love and adore and has crowds around them, and the popular people. I tend to gravitate toward, just that, maybe people that are, I find myself to be that type of person. It's not exactly, the one that everybody gravitates toward. That's just the way I feel, and so you kind of go toward people that you feel comfortable with,
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And one of the other things I want to say is, not everything has to be ministry either, right? Not everything has to be ministry. I mean, we often get in this thing where we have to go through a parish program, or we have to go through a social program in order to help somebody. Like this, it's not the case. It's not the case, right? I mean, if we gravitate toward making friends, as you said, if we gravitate just naturally toward making friends, and of people who are in need or are different than us or whatever, then that's beautiful. But you do not have to go through a parish program or some societal program to help feed people or to help nurture people. That is not the case, folks. So if you can just help somebody, help them. I mean, I remember, these things change your own life. These things change. I think that's a huge piece of my story. In helping others, I am changed. And God knows that. Like, God knows that in your life too. I'll just give you one more quick story before we take a little break here and we go into a short break. I just want to give you one more story. I was in Chicago with my college buddies. Probably, I think it was 2009. I had just moved out to the Midwest a few years earlier, and they came out to visit me. Nobody was married yet. They just came out for a weekend to go enjoy some baseball at Wrigley Field. And we stayed overnight at a hotel in Chicago and did the Chicago events and the Chicago thing, right? And one of those things was a Navy pier, and my college friends, they were going to go do a Segway ride. And I can't ride a Segway. I mean, my body just can't do it. I've had a stroke and I can't balance, and so I would fall over, and I just couldn't do it. But I wasn't about to let them not go and do a Segway tour of Chicago. I mean, it was a 2-hour Segway tour, a 3-hour Segway tour. I said, go enjoy it, guys. Go have fun. I'm fine. I'm at Navy Pier. Everything is going to be good. But one of the things I love to do that I hadn't done yet was see the Basilica or the Cathedral of Chicago. And so I Googled it on my iPod at the time, and there's Wi-Fi, wherever I was. Didn't have all these smartphones and everything. Uh, and so I Googled it, and I got the directions on my iPod, and I followed them to. I wanted to go to Holy Name Cathedral in Chicago. Uh, so so I started. It was maybe like a 45-minute long walk. So I decided to walk. Walked down Michigan Avenue, and there was all the shops and everything. And um, I I came upon this big steeple, and I thought, oh, that must be Holy Name. Maybe I made a wrong turn or whatever. And so I I get to the front of this steeple, this cathedral, and it says St. James Episcopal Cathedral. I'm like, well, all right. I like Episcopalians too. I just want to go in and see what it looks like. Might as well. I'm on my way. And I was a little bit lost at this point. I wasn't exactly, following my iPod anymore. I didn't have Wi-Fi or anything to be able to navigate. So I walk in, and I see this 300-pound homeless man sitting or sleeping on a bench. And I just ignored him at first. And I pulled on the first set of doors that led into the nave of the church. I'd made it into the vestibule, but I hadn't made it into the nave. And so I pulled on the first set of doors. They were locked. I went over to the second set of doors in the middle. I pulled on those, and they were also locked. And I went over to the third one, which is where the gentleman was sleeping on the bench right next to it. And I yanked on the doors, and they too were closed. And I was like, well, I'm out of here. But what I didn't realize was that when I pulled on the third set of doors, I had woken him up from his sleep. And so he wakes up, and he sees me walking out, and I'm 150-pound pasty white guy. This guy is 300-pound black man in Chicago sleeping on a bench. He asks me, young man, do you have $20 you can lend a guy in need? And what happened next, I swear, was the Holy Spirit, because these words do not come out of one's mouth. I said, you know what? Not only do I have $20 that I can give you, but how about we go to lunch? And it was right around lunchtime. And so this guy looks at me, and he's like, okay. For a moment you're sitting there and you're praying, like, okay, please just have him say no. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm already terrified that could this guy have a gun? What's the deal, right? So he goes, well, where do you want to go? I said, I have no idea. I'm from Wisconsin. I don't really know the area really well. So I'll tell you what, you pick a spot that's close to here. I'll take you, and I'll take you. He goes, well, there's a food court about a 5-minute walk. And so I reached out to him, and we just started walking. Right? We just started walking. He led me to this little food court, and he goes, "What do you want?" I said, "Well, wherever you want to go, wherever you want to go." So he picked Subway, and so we sat down. It wasn't anything expensive or lavish, but we sat down and we had this amazing meal. It was this amazing meal, and he told me his whole life story. He told me how he was mentally ill in some ways because it all didn't make sense. But he told me how he had spent some time in jail, and about how he had had a whole lot of different issues in his life, and how nobody loved him or cared for him, and that he was trying to get a room for the night for $60. To be able to sleep and get a shower, and he had every possession in his bag, that he had ever owned. His name was Albert, and at one point toward the end of our conversation, he looked at me and he said, he goes, why are you doing this? And I just said, well, because, I just saw you, you asked, and what else was I supposed to do? What else was I supposed to do? And then he asked me another question that kind of just shocked the heck out of me. He said, do you believe in Jesus? And I said, yeah, I do. I do believe in Jesus. I'm a Catholic and whatnot. And he goes, and this is amazing what he said. I don't know where I would be today. I don't know where I would be today without Jesus. I want people to think about that just a second. This guy was sleeping on a bench in Chicago's St. James Episcopal Cathedral. And he just said, I don't know where I would be today if I didn't have Jesus. And that made me think for a long time
Yes.
about where I was in relationship with Jesus. Where would I be without Jesus? And I had friends who were, we were getting ready to go to Wrigley Field to watch a Cubs game. I had,
Mm-hmm.
I had, a family who cared about me and loved me. I had all of these things that this guy didn't have, and he knew that he was better off with Jesus um, than without. And it changed my life. It is the hands down. I have had lavish Thanksgiving dinners. I've eaten with cardinals, bishops, priests. I've had amazing meals. That is the best meal I've ever had.
I'm so glad you got a chance to share that on the program because guess what? It's now recorded. So it won't be forgotten.
For
It's
sure.
recorded.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah, you gave us a good visual. I mean, and I think Bill's right. Think about that. Because for whoever's listening, if you have any type of, poorness of spirit, of material goods, whatever it is, God loves you and He is watching out for you. Maybe even just to hear this program today to help to lift your spirits a little bit, give you some hope, right? Because isn't that what this program is about?
Yes,
Is
it is.
sowing hope. I just want to make a shout out to, if I could, to the foundation that I'm affiliated with. I'm the director for a Catholic foundation. It's called the St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation. And what we do is we make outreach to families in crisis. So I just had to bring that up because we're talking about helping the poor, and we make outreach to those families and individuals in crisis. And the initial mission has been to people affected by divorce and separation. Because, sometimes it happens that when there's a divorce in a family, whether it be for the couple itself or the kids involved, it really affects everyone. And I've talked to a lot of different people who are going through rough times as a result of that family breakup. So I just want to make a shout out to those people. And if you're listening and you're one of those people, just check out our website sometime. It's on nonatus.org, NONNATUS.org, and reach out to us because we have a little contact, a place there that you can make a contact with us, send us a prayer request, or reach out to me. So just wanted to mention that because I think that the poor can also be those families that have broken up for whatever reason, and those who are suffering as a result of not having that intact family structure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I want to take that short break right now here on Sowing Hope. Again, you're listening to Sowing Hope, and it is a live stream on both Podbean. We thank you for joining us on Podbean, and we got a lot of listeners listening in, so we appreciate that. And then we also want to thank you for listening on YouTube as well. We're going to take that short break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our conversation about helping the poor. So stay tuned right here on Patchwork Heart Radio. We'll be right back.
Please join Arise Milwaukee for special prayer and worship events on Friday, March 13th and Saturday, March 14th at Carroll University in Waukesha. All ages are welcome at the Arise Milwaukee Worship Night on Friday from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Join us for adoration, prayer, encouraging messages, and worship. Free childcare will be offered and no registration is required. On Saturday, middle and high school students gather for the 15th annual Wisconsin Catholic Youth Rally. Together in fellowship, they'll hear relevant and encouraging talks, be led in prayerful worship, and have the opportunities to receive the sacrament of reconciliation and attend Mass. Please join us for these special Arise Milwaukee events featuring conference speakers Nick Frank and Lauren Wright and worship led by the Josh Blakesley Band. You'll hear who Jesus is, be invited to consider your need for Him, and encounter Him in the Blessed Sacrament. We look forward to praying with you at Carroll University on March 13th and 14th. To learn more and to register for the Saturday youth event, please visit arisemke.org.
Join Patchwork Heart Ministry founder Bill Snyder for Running to the Heart of the Father, a 3-night parish mission at St. Bridget's Catholic Church in Pleasant Hill, Missouri, from March 18th to March 20th. Bill will use stories, personal witness, and prayer experiences to inspire and challenge all to lay their weaknesses and insecurities at the foot of the cross and run to the heart of the Father. Worship music will be led by Penny Warner, and the mission begins with fellowship each night at 6:30 p.m. For more information, visit patchworkheart.org. At times it seems like the world today is filled with so much division, bigotry, and hatred. So it's up to us to make sure that we get back to the basics, and that is Jesus Christ and his message of faith, hope, and love. Faith, Hope, Love with John and Morgan Bender is a new project that seeks to do just that by engaging and inspiring Catholics within the Archdiocese of Milwaukee and beyond. Read personal faith stories, interviews, and news all by visiting the Faith, Hope, and Love blog.blogspot.com or follow us on Twitter at Johnny Bender MKE.
The St. Raymond Nonatus Foundation for Freedom, Family, and Faith offers prayerful accompaniment for those who are affected by divorce and separation. We offer free online support meetings for those affected by divorce and for adult children of divorce. You can learn more about us at nonatus.org. That's NONNATUS.org. Text or call 215-870-9913.
Patchwork Heart Ministry is committed to sowing hope into broken hearts by helping young people encounter the love of Jesus Christ and his Catholic Church through prayer, storytelling, and media initiatives. We invite you to prayerfully consider supporting this mission financially. Mail your tax-deductible donation to Patchwork Heart Ministry at P.O. Box 563, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin, zip code 53147. Or visit patchworkheart.org to donate online. That's Patchwork Heart Ministry, P.O. Box 563, Lake Geneva, Wisconsin 53147, or online at patchworkheart.org.
Alrighty, folks, and welcome back here to the Sowing Hope podcast. I'm Bill Snyder today, joined by Ann DeSantis. So, Ann, thanks for joining me on this episode, and it's just wonderful to be talking today about helping the poor.
It is, Bill. Thank you. On this early morning here with our friends, thanks everybody for joining us, and it's a great topic, not just for the season of Lent, I think, but for all the time, because the poor are always among us. Even if we're not in, as Mother Teresa says, even if we're not in Calcutta, right? I mean, they're everywhere. They're in our own families. They're in our neighborhoods, schools, workplace. The poor could be that person that that everybody else is kind of marginalized. So if you're on this call and you can think of that person that, nobody else talks to, nobody else goes over and says hello or spends time with, the person that when you go to a party that sits by themselves, I mean, that's the poor. So just a shout out there, because sometimes we have the image that the poor, we can write a check or just drop some food off someplace and feel good about it. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think we should all do it. And as I mentioned earlier in the call, there's wonderful organizations that we can help the poor. But remember, you can play a role in the lives of the poor by just thinking about somebody that that could use a friend.
Yeah, it is. It is such an important thing to do. Think of one person this week. Think of one person this week that you could take out for coffee and just talk with them about their life and about their, poverty. There's got to be somebody in your life that is, poor in some way. Doesn't always have to be physically poor. Doesn't always have to be materially poor. It can be poor, as in poor in, spirit. And so, who's that one person that you know that you can take out for a cup of coffee today or a lunch, and then go do it? And it's not about checking some box either. I think a lot of people may be thinking that we're talking about this topic during the Lenten season because it's all about almsgiving and giving to the poor and all that stuff. No, I mean it might fit in nicely for this time of year, but this is not about giving to the poor because we're trying to check some box. I think
Yes.
that's one of the biggest things. This is not about checking a box, folks. It's about doing what? It's about helping others at their core and their need. That's really what it comes down to. Helping people in their core of their being and helping them in their need. And that's what we're here to support people with. And it's not because we are Christian. It's not because we are Catholic. It's because we are human beings who need to help others.
Amen.
And so whatever creed you belong to, whatever faith you subscribe to, if you subscribe to any faith at all, I think if you're a decent person, if you're a human being, you're going to recognize that those people that we're trying to help it's a human condition, human problem. It's definitely not a thing we do just because we are Christian or just because we're Catholic. That is not the case with
Well, it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be. It doesn't mean that bill doesn't mean that it doesn't exist, that people don't just say, hey, it's Lent, I think I'll go bring some canned food over to the food shelter or something. I mean, it happens. And that's I mean, in the end of the day, you did something good either way. So great, you help somebody. But I guess with Bill and I think, Bill, we're both calling out to not just to everybody listening, but also to ourselves, right? That, I mean, our relationship with God, okay, I read this before and I really believe this is true. Salvation, okay, our relationship with God depends on how well we identified with those who are suffering. And I'm going to say it would be like the suffering Christ. The suffering Christ is everywhere, okay? How well did you identify with that person? It starts with empathizing with somebody, okay? Opening up your ears and listening to somebody. It might be somebody you don't feel like listening to. They want to tell you a story or whatever. But opening up your ears instead of we're always constantly wanting to be heard and things like that. That's why I think I said on one of our other podcasts, we got 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? Yeah. For a reason. Now, Mother Teresa also said, Saint Teresa of Calcutta, as we call her, and as she is, the saint, we think sometimes that poverty is being hungry, naked, and homeless. The poverty of being unwanted, unloved, and uncared for is the greatest poverty. We must start in our own homes to remedy this kind of poverty. I mean, our last podcast, I should say, was about bullying. I think that's another way that we can all begin to reach out to the poor, because sometimes the person who's marginalized, that you may know in your church or in your neighborhood, your family, who's marginalized? Think about it. Who do you know that's marginalized? Who do I know that's marginalized? You know what? In our world, we have a goal of being rich and powerful and popular. When we reach the end of our lives and we meet God, all those things aren't going to matter. It's not going to matter that you had all these friends, or that you went to this college, or that you made the 7-figure salary, or that you had all these birthday cards that arrived on your birthday, and you can say that you have all these friends that care about you. or how rich you are, how perfectly neat and clean your house is, and how many beautiful things you have, and how many expensive purses. None of that stuff is gonna matter when you meet the Lord. People are going to walk away from that cemetery, and your life is over on earth. But eternity begins right now, and the way that we begin to have that relationship is by recognizing the poor. Because I'm inviting anybody listening, go to Matthew 25 in the Bible and read about how God is going to meet us at the end of our lives. Did you feed the hungry? Did you give drink to the thirsty? And as Bill and I were saying, it might not necessarily be just that, did you literally give food to the hungry? You should, and I think we all should. But the hungry aren't just people who are materially hungry. It's those that are marginalized, right? Think about that.
Yes.
It's just food for thought, right? Literally food for thought. Keep giving to the poor, keep giving drink to the thirsty. But remember, the identification with the marginalized are really what we should be doing, because all of those other material things, they're not going to mean, excuse my language, they're not going to mean diddly squat at the end of our lives. None of it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. And I think one of the big things that that I think about when you're talking about that too. I remember especially Matthew 25 when I was actually at mass, a daily mass, not long ago, and the priest brought up this reading. He brought up this homily, and he said, Jesus really doesn't talk about hell very much. He really doesn't. In the context of the gospel, yes, he mentions sin. He mentions that there will be, a place of wailing and grinding of teeth and all those things. But he really doesn't outright mention or describe hell very much. And when he does, it is more about the things that we have not done than it's the things that we have done. And it's about the people that we have not served versus the people that or the pleasures that we have taken up in life. And so, when we look at the Gospel of Matthew, where Jesus outright does mention hell, and that those people who do not clothe the naked and feed the hungry and care for the sick and visit the imprisoned, when that is the case, he said, there are strong words. Depart from me,
Yes.
Depart from me. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't want to hear, but it doesn't come from the place of I don't want to go to hell. It comes from the place of I want to serve and be like Jesus. And I think, for us as Christians and for us as Catholics, we can look at that. We can examine that. And say, how do I, as a human being, act more like Jesus? How do I, as a human being, act more like Jesus? And Jesus gives us the model in Matthew 25. He does. It is a perfect model that he gives us to look at and say, how do I become like you? It's I am doing these things. And Jesus reached out to those people too. Jesus reached out to the poor and the marginalized, and that was his entire mission. How many times did he say to the Pharisees and to the leaders of the Jewish communities? How many times did he tell them? You're not doing this right. When he talked about fasting to the the church officials, he was like, you're concerned with is washing the outside of the cup. I'm calling you to wash the inside of the cup. And I think when we start looking at who Jesus is and what he is challenging people to, it's reaching out to those who are lost. It's leaving the 99. That's the other part of this. Leaving the 99 Yeah, the 99 looks really attractive. Going to the bar, hanging out with your friends, going to the ball game or on the Segway tour. That that sounds like a lot of fun. The 99% of the people out there are doing it. What is Jesus doing? He isn't hanging out with those people. He isn't hanging out with those people. He's finding the lost, and he's bringing them back. That's what Jesus is doing.
Yeah, that was awesome the way you just described that, because that's what it comes down to. Religion, and I think, Bill, you and I have had a lot of talks about this before, not online, but just aside from that religion has to be about, some people say it's not about just being a good person. That's right, it's not, but it's got to be part of it, and it's got to be a big part of it.
Yeah.
Right? It can't just be, rule regulation based, and we know there are rules and regulations, and we follow it. We try our best to follow them, right? And if we don't, we go back to God and say, "I'm sorry, forgive me." And as Catholics, we can go to the sacraments for that, the sacrament of confession. But I mean, what it comes down to is, it is being a kind person. It is being a good person. It is, forgiving somebody. It is acting like a nice person, honest to God, really. I mean, it's got to be part of the equation, right? It's got to be part of the equation. Yeah. That's my opinion. I mean, another one I just pulled up from the Holy Father, he says, you pray for the hungry, then you feed them. This is how prayer works. So we can't just, put our head down and pray for everybody. You know what? You should. But when you're done, do something about it. Try to do something about it instead of just, prayer has to lead to action too, right? I mean, so that's what you said about reaching out to the marginalized is, trying to do something about it. So I'm encouraging anybody listening, Bill and I are talking a lot about the poor and, it could be the hungry, the thirsty, the incarcerated. Hey, remember too that the incarcerated, of course, there are people that are in prison, but there's people who are incarcerated in their own lives, in their own homes, with no friends, nobody to help, nobody to reach out, nobody that really cares or thinks to check on them. So they're also the incarcerated, the depressed, the people who are addicted, right? I mean, that's such a problem in our lives today too, is in our world, is in this country, is the addicted, and those families who are affected by addiction. So I want to make a shout out to them too, to let them know that we care and reach out to us. Our email address is sowinghope@patchworkheart.org. Sowinghope@patchworkheart.org. Now I just opened up a Twitter account for Sowing Hope Podcast, an Instagram at Sowing Hope Podcast, and we also have the Facebook page. So I had to throw that in since I know we're coming near the end, Bill, here.
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely reach out to us, and definitely, email us, because, both Ann and I will get the email. Again, it's Sowing Hope, SEWING, hope at patchworkheart.org, SEWING, hope at patchworkheart.org. And when you, join us, via, Facebook and our Facebook group, you can interact with us in between our shows, and just, bring up topics, bring up questions. We would love to hear from you. Know that both Ann and I will get the emails you send us, and we're happy to email and send you stuff back. We are just thrilled that we've had so many of you joining us today on this episode, and we really encourage you to just continue to reach out and let us know what topics you want to hear too. Of course, we kind of always have a general idea and plan, and I'll ask you, Ann, as I kind of have been doing as we near the end, what is the next topic that we're discussing on the list?
Okay, well, the other day we did bullying, and I thought that was a great topic, but Bill, we really only got halfway through that list, so we were going to do kind of part two of bullying, And I think that it goes in line with this topic, though. I really think so. I think that it goes in line with helping the poor, because those who are marginalized and bullied and left out are also those who are poor. And Mother Teresa says, if you judge people, you have no time to love them. I keep bringing up Mother Teresa because I think our Saint Teresa of Calcutta, she is such a great role model for this topic.
Yeah.
And I know she's also we picked her as our patron for the Sowing Hope podcast.
Yes, we did. Yeah, we did. You know, we ought to do a show just about our patrons. I know we just have about 4 minutes left, so I'll just say we do have patrons for our show. They are St. John of God, because St. John of God is the patron saint of people with heart conditions, and both Ann and I have had heart conditions. So he is the patron saint of heart conditions. And then because we really both have a beautiful, we want to reach out and help the poor and serve the poor. We know Saint Teresa, Saint Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She is just a beautiful soul.
Yes.
To help us. Just a beautiful soul to help us. So we're just so we're so blessed that you've joined us today, and that you've decided to be a part of our show. Thank you so much for joining us on this podcast, and we hope you'll join us again. You know what? The other thing too, if you're on Podbean listening right now, head over to patchworkheart.podbean.com, patchworkheart.podbean.com, and then go over and just click the thing that says, follow this podcast, and you'll be able to get a group of notifications and whatnot when we go live. You of course can download the Podbean app. And you can chat with us and talk with us online, and also be able to just reach out and be a part of our community. So we're just so excited that you've decided to be a part of what we have going on, and yeah, follow us during the week. Anything we should leave them with, Ann?
Well, I mean, Bill, I want to thank you. I really loved hearing your stories today, Bill. They were awesome, especially that one about the homeless man. I mean, that was just a great one. So if somebody tuned in late, you had to go back and listen to the whole podcast, because Bill gave a great story. But just to let everybody know that, we care about you personally. We love to connect with you, pray for what your intentions. Email our prayer intentions to sowinghope@patchworkheart.org. That's SEWING, hope@patchworkheart.org. So we're going to be back again Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time, right here. So we'll see you then for part 2 of bullying.
Yes, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Ann. It has been an absolute pleasure. Again, friend us, like us, social media, it's all there, folks. Sowing Hope at patchworkheart.org is our email. Until Thursday at 6 p.m., keep sowing hope into broken hearts. Thanks for listening to this episode of Sowing Hope on Patchwork Heart Radio. For more information about this podcast and our ministries, visit our websites, patchworkheart.org and DeSantis.com. You can also follow and interact with us on Twitter at PWH Ministry or DeSantis 2.